that we've been seeing and hearing.
If there's one thing a political party is going to do, it's to protect the political party as it currently is. And the people who know that the best are perhaps Republicans who experienced it vividly in 2016 when Donald Trump ran for the nomination, and he ran as an outsider, and he shook up the party, and he dispensed with all the establishment types, and then he took over the party with all of his extreme views on all sorts of things. And I call them extreme because that's what Republicans called them at the time. So, I mean, this is actually, in some ways, kind of a Trump playbook.
Well, except Trump wasn't trying to, bring about the downfall of Western civilization like some of these socialist candidates are in the Democratic Party.
So let's just be clear about that.
And so, I mean, look, I'm not a Democrat, but I've been amused at the infighting in New York City today, and some of it is pretty powerful constituencies. I saw a video last night in one of these victory parties of a room full of young white socialists screaming at a television with Hakeem Jeffries on it, who's poised, by the way, to possibly become the first black Speaker of the House, going, "You're next, you're next, you're next." Not a great look for the party. I saw that Mamdani went after.
Welcome back to Top Debate Commentary. Today, we are breaking down a massive political earthquake that is sending shockwaves through the Democratic establishment. Following high-profile primary victories by Democratic Socialists in New York City, national political strategists and party leaders are locked in an intense war over the future direction of the party. Is socialism a winning populist movement focused on economic survival, or is it an electoral trap that Republicans are eager to weaponize in national elections? Throughout this broadcast, we examine hard data from CNN's chief analyst, witness heated panel clashes over party loyalty versus voter outrage, and explore why party insiders are in a total tailspin. Let's jump right into the numbers and the debate.
Big wins for Democratic Socialists in New York City, backed by the popular Democratic Socialist mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Already, there are Republicans trying to tie the winners here to national Democrats, and already there are some national Democrats a little bit nervous about how their own party might be painted. With us now, CNN chief data analyst Harry Enten. Sir, good to see you. So when we talk about Democratic Socialists, how are they perceived?
I will tell you, there is a reason why Republicans nationwide are licking their chops and why there are at least some Democrats who are a little bit worried, because what is true in New York City in a Democratic primary ain't necessarily true nationwide with the general electorate. I mean, just take a look here. Net favorable rating of Democratic Socialists. If you look at Democrats nationwide, look at this. Democratic Socialists are on the positive side of the ledger at plus 17 points. This includes Democratic-leaning independents. But look at all voters. A completely different world. 27 points underwater Democratic Socialists of America are in the net favorable rating. So what are we talking about? A 44-point difference here in the wrong direction when we come to Democratic Socialists of America, jumping from being pretty popular among Democrats to being not popular at all among all voters.
What about just the word socialist or socialism? How's that doing?
Yeah, okay. So, one of the trends that we have seen is among Democrats, socialism has become more popular over the last decade and a half. But what about the rest of the electorate? And this, I think, gives the game away right here. Okay, positive view of socialism. Among Democrats, look at this. Up considerably from where we were in 2010, 50% to now 66% now. That's a jump of 16 points in a decade and a half. But look at all others. The number is the same. It was 29% back in 2010. It's 30% now. Socialism has become increasingly popular among Democrats, but it is a much tougher sell in the rest of the electorate. It's a much tougher sell among independents, and this is why Republicans actually think that there could be some electoral opportunities because of these Democratic Socialists winning primaries, and why there are a number of mainstream Democrats who are going, I'm not quite sure about that.
Okay. Getting a lot of focus here in New York City. There are a lot of people, I occasionally one of them as a non-native New Yorker, think that New York gets disproportionate focus. Is this something that really is only...
We open with CNN host Abby Phillip bringing in chief data analyst Harry Enten to break down the cold, hard math behind Democratic Socialism. And the numbers reveal a massive political divide that is alarming national campaign strategists. Harry Enten highlights an eye-opening 44-point gap in favorability, while Democratic Socialists enjoy a positive 17-point rating among registered Democrats. They sit 27 points underwater with the overall electorate. Harry walks us through graphics showing how views of socialism have shifted dramatically over the last decade and a half. Among Democrats, positive views of socialism jumped 16 points to 66%. But among all other voters, that number has remained completely flat at 30%. Harry points out that while insurgent progressive candidates are winning primary races in deep blue urban centers like New York City, those same labels create enormous vulnerabilities in nationwide general elections. With search interest for the Democratic Socialists of America spiking to all-time highs following victories backed by figures like Zohran Mamdani, Harry explains why Republicans are eager to tie national Democrats to these victories, while moderate establishment Democrats are watching with deep concern.
First, I start off every sentence with Nixon 5, so I just have to put that out there.
Okay.
But the truth is, he's incorrect. Like the whole context is wrong. And we keep pretending somehow that the people in power in a lot of places were not folks from outside who came into the party one way or the other, who didn't like what was happening, said, I'm going to try to make some change. And that's what's happening here. And quite honestly, what we see happen in New York City is, to me, an extension of what happened from 2008, where people who may not have even bought a black toothbrush voted for Barack Obama. They then voted for Donald Trump. There are people in New York City who voted for Donald Trump and AOC. People have been
Zohran
saying,
Mamdani
that's
after
correct.
that, yeah.
There are people who are saying, we don't want the status quo, we don't want the same message and the same messenger. The party leadership that I belong to has rejected that time and time again, and every decision they've made has led us to Donald Trump, and every decision they made have led us to this point. So my hope is that the party will finally say, let's listen to some messaging that is actually working. Messaging that pushes back against the divisiveness that we've been seeing and hearing.
If there's one thing a political party is going to do, it's to protect the political party as it currently is. And the people who know that the best are perhaps Republicans who experienced it vividly in 2016 when Donald Trump ran for the nomination, and he ran as an outsider, and he shook up the party, and he dispensed with all the establishment types, and then he took over the party with all of his extreme views on all sorts of things. And I call them extreme because that's what Republicans called them at the time. So, I mean, this is actually, in some ways, kind of a Trump playbook.
Well, except Trump wasn't trying to, bring about the downfall of Western civilization like some of these socialist candidates are in the Democratic Party.
So let's just be clear about that.
And so, I mean, look, I'm not a Democrat, but I've been amused at the infighting in New York City today. And some of it is pretty powerful constituencies. I saw a video last night in one of these victory parties of a room full of young white socialists screaming at a television with Hakeem Jeffries on it, who's poised, by the way, to possibly become the first black Speaker of the House, going, you're next, you're next, you're next. Not a great look for the party. I saw that Mamdani went after the head of the Hispanic caucus as well. I see Tish James is even mad at Mamdani. So there's a lot of splits.
All of a sudden, Republicans are so into identity politics. I'm shocked. I am shocked.
A few things here. First, a lot of times in campaigns, we see politicians endorse other candidates, endorse politicians, and that's all they do, right? You get a press release that says so and so just endorsed me. No, this. I would say, Mamdani and his team, which have figured out the formula in New York City, not only endorsed, they campaigned with these candidates. His team was working with these candidates, the team that was so effective in working on social media and getting voters out. Also, let's remember that it was, I think, something like 5% of eligible voters that showed up to vote in yesterday's primary. So very few votes made a very big difference.
I was on the ground speaking to voters. So let me say, it is usually a very few amount of people who make the decision anyway. So the pretending like that is
a party primary.
That's correct. But I want to be clear. On the ground, what people cared about is affordability. What people cared about was feeling safe and what that means in their community. What people cared about was healthcare. So the construct is incorrect, because I think people care about that across the country, definitely New York City. What the Republican Party has been able to do is say that you don't feel safe, you don't feel like you can afford to pay here because of people you may not like, whether it is trans, whether it is immigrants. What Mamdani and others, by the way, there's always been an issue with class and race when it comes to the left, and we have to address that. But what they have been able to do is that the reason that you can't live in New York City is because of an exploitive economic system. And that economic system is what needs to change.
But can I ask you,
and
though,
then that's-
because-
hold
can
on,
I
let
ask
me
you,
let
because
you
I thought, I mean, to me, Nydia Velázquez is a progressive.
Yeah.
She is, she's most definitely, and she was in Congress for 34 and a half years.
Correct.
She endorsed somebody to replace her, and that's who Mamdani beat yesterday. Mamdani's candidate beat yesterday. To me, Adriano Espaillat, the first Dominican to be elected to Congress, was an undocumented immigrant also. I don't see them as moderate.
Nydia's legacy should have been more respected. Let's just be clear about that.
And she was the first. She was the first member of the New York Congressional Caucus to endorse Mamdani.
What Republicans have actually has been good at is making these labels, even though people don't know what they are. And so what I do know is there's a lot of agreement about what people feel and want to be able to afford where they live and want to feel safe and want health care. When we decide these labels, the biggest thing to me about yesterday and the way the direction we have been going is who is going to use their political capital to push past the normal ways of doing business in politics. And that is what voters are saying. I want the person now who is going to push past, I guess the best way to put it may be respectability politics, which we do need, but push past that. So when I get a phone call from a leader of a legislature, or I get a phone call from the executive, I'm going to push past that and say this is what my constituents.
Over the past, host Abby Phillip turns the table to New York City public advocate Jumaane Williams to respond to harsh criticism from former DNC chair Jamie Harrison, who publicly argued that candidates who criticize the party machine shouldn't run on its line or use its resources. Jumaane Williams immediately rejects that premise, pointing out that political parties are constantly reshaped by outsiders, driven by voter frustration. Jumaane argues that everyday voters aren't obsessed with ideological labels. They care about affordability, rent, healthcare, and safety. He emphasizes that when traditional party leadership fails to deliver material economic relief, voters inevitably seek out messengers who promise to dismantle the status quo. The conversation turns fiery as the panel draws a provocative direct comparison between today's progressive primary insurgents and Donald Trump's hostile takeover of the Republican Party in 2016. Panelists debate whether insurgent candidates are tapping into genuine working-class outrage against an exploitative economic system or risking a severe general election backlash, while conservative commentators point to victory parties where young progressives chanted warning messages at House leadership. Jumaane Williams maintains that people are simply exhausted by respectability politics and are flocking to candidates willing to aggressively challenge party norms to fight for working families.
This is what my constituents.
Over the past 8 months, all of you in this room know how much the Democratic machine has tried to count us out. How at every turn they've underestimated us. And in the words of Shirley Chisholm, even if the establishment machine has done everything in its power to keep our community from having a seat at the table, well, I have some bad news for them. We've brought folding chairs.
All right.
I
mean, the establishment machine, she's
Abby,
going after them.
We're still in the anti-establishment element of our political history, I suppose, in our country right now. But to me, if I'm a Democrat, I'm really wondering, and I'm really concerned about this going beyond just New York, beyond Washington, D.C., because I can assure you, we're going to make the argument to voters, you can either be for less taxes or the party that wants to tax you more, because if you're going to say everything's for free, that money has to come from somewhere.
Well, it already is happening all around the country.
You run the risk of pushing out a lot of highly successful people.
I think what the people like Zohran Mamdani are putting on the table is, do we need a more fair economic system where people at the bottom can do better and not just people at the top? And the reason that message is resonating is because it is a fact that economic inequality has been supercharged in the last 10, 20, 30 years in this country. So that is a fact that's irrespective of where you are in this country. And I think that's why there is a real question of, it's not about, are you going to run socialists everywhere, but is the anger against the establishment, the anger against an economic system that is leaving people worried about what they put in their gas tank and how much money they have for it, is that anger going to fuel candidates that speak to it versus the candidates who just want to maintain the status quo?
I would say that one of the things we learned last night is that past the very friendly smile of Zohran Mamdani, he is a ruthless tactician and an ideologue who wants more people of his ideological bent elected, and he's not satisfied with just being.
And he doesn't. And even, I mean, Nydia Velázquez endorsed him, and he didn't.
And the other thing that from last night is, to quote my friend Whoopi Goldberg, I would say to Chuck Schumer, dude, you're in danger, because this, I think, puts a lot of wind in the sails of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to challenge him.
Was economic concerns that got Dan Goldman banned from that coffee shop in Brooklyn?
I think, first of all, that was horrible. And so I want to make sure I lift it up. Dan Goldman is a gentleman as far as I'm concerned. I also think it was horrible, the anti-Haitian and anti-black rhetoric, and anti-Muslim rhetoric that occurred with the Chevalier race. But I do think economics is at the root of it, and equality.
In that specific instance,
but
you think it had anything to do with economics?
A lot of specifics, but we need to look at what's happening.
I just want you to admit what was actually behind these congressional races.
We're
talking all around it.
No, we're not. What was behind those races was that people can't afford to live, and the inequality that exists in different spaces.
All right.
Okay.
Everyone, thank you very much.
As we enter the final stretch of this debate, the panel reacts to primary winner Daraya Avila Chevalier channeling Shirley Chisholm's iconic words during her victory speech, declaring that if the establishment machine won't give working people a seat at the table, they brought folding chairs. Host Abby Phillip presses the desk on whether this anti-establishment wave will expand far beyond major metropolitan areas. The panel engages in a sharp debate over the root causes of voter anger, while moderate voices warn that radical economic proposals risk alienating successful taxpayers and driving businesses out of major cities. Jumaane Williams and fellow panelists counter that runaway economic inequality over the last several decades has left working-class families in desperation. The discussion climaxes with a striking warning to establishment heavyweights like Senate Leader Chuck Schumer and Representative Dan Goldman, noting that Zohran Mamdani's tactical, highly disciplined field operations are giving massive wind to the sails of figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The message from the desk is loud and clear. The rage against status quo politics is real, growing, and poses an existential challenge to traditional political machines across the country. That brings us to the end of today's deep dive into this crucial debate. If you enjoyed this analysis, make sure to hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to Top Debate Commentary for more sharp commentary on the biggest political clashes on television.